She didn't even look up when she handed me the envelope. Just placed it on the counter like a receipt and said, "You'll land on your feet." No hug. No smile. No thank you. Just 7 years of sacrifice reduced to a goddamn manila envelope between a half-eaten avocado toast and her freshly printed bar certificate. I stood there in the kitchen, still in my grease-stained overalls from the night shift, the stink of old oil clinging to me. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in a row in months. My back ached. My knees clicked when I bent. But I smiled anyway. Like an idiot. Because I thought this was our victory. We used to dream about this moment. Back when we lived in that one bedroom over the liquor store and shared a single laptop we'd bought off Craigslist. I memorized her flashcards. Quizzed her at midnight while folding laundry. Cooked meals out of cans when we were too broke for groceries. I remember sewing the damn lining back into her second-hand suit jacket before her first court internship. She'd cried when I surprised her with it. Said I was her ride or die. Right? I opened the envelope. Divorce papers. Pre-signed by her. Everything legal, airtight. No accusations. No explanations. Just a line item that said I could retain personal effects and transportation. She even had the nerve to list my 2002 F-150 as mutual property generously forfeited. I laughed. Not out loud. Just inside, something hollow and sharp cracking open. I looked up and she was already at the door, grabbing her blazer. "We can talk later," she said without turning around. "I have a lunch with the firm." That's when I realized there was no we anymore. Maybe hadn't been for a long time. Maybe I'd just been too tired to notice. Or maybe I'd noticed and pretended I didn't because love makes you stupid. Or blind. Or both. I didn't yell. Didn't ask questions. Didn't beg. I just stared at her as she walked out of the apartment with that new strut, heels clicking with confidence, spine too straight, voice too polished. She wasn't mine anymore. Hell, maybe she never really was. Just a project I mistook for a partner. I stood there for a long time. The clock ticked. A faucet dripped. My dog, Baxter, limped in and looked at me like he knew something had died in the room. I knelt down and hugged him. Didn't even cry. I was too empty for that. By the time she got back that evening, her hair curled and makeup done like she'd been filming a commercial, I was gone. Left the keys. Took the truck. Grabbed one duffel and the photo from our 3rd anniversary, her in that yellow sundress, barefoot on the dock, laughing like the world hadn't burned yet. I don't know why I took it. Habit, maybe? Or stupidity. I drove without GPS. Just kept turning left when the road let me. Slept in parking lots. Ate gas station food. Thought about everything I didn't say. Every small thing I gave up so she could win. Every time I said we'll figure it out when I really meant I'll figure it out while you chase your dreams. She'd always said I was too steady. Too predictable. "You're the kind of man people settle for," she told me once during an argument back when we still bothered to fight. Not the one they chase. I should have heard the thunder behind those words. But I was too busy checking her tires and making sure she had gas for her commute. The irony? I was proud of her. So damn proud. Watching her study, grind, stress, then beat the odds? I loved her even more for it. I didn't care that my savings vanished or that my dreams got smaller while hers grew teeth. I thought I was building a foundation. Turns out I was laying a runway. And she took off the second she didn't need me weighing her down. I didn't call my parents. Didn't tell my friends. I disappeared like a stain on a cheap suit. I wanted to see how long it would take for her to notice. Spoiler, she didn't. Not then. Not for 10 years. I didn't pack much. Just the old duffel, Baxter's leash, and $412 in loose bills from the junk drawer. I left the wedding photo on the wall not out of sentiment, but because the smile on her face in it wasn't for me. It never had been. It was for the idea of success, of status, of escape. She just used my shoulders to climb. The truck coughed a little when I turned the key. I remember thinking that was fitting. Everything in my life coughed or limped or cracked by that point. I didn't leave a note. No dramatic farewell or screw you. Just silence. It felt sharper than words ever could. My first stop was the storage unit. I sold what little I had that anyone might want: tools, a few electronics, an old guitar I never learned to play. The pawn guy gave me $85 and a shrug. "Divorce?" he asked. I didn't answer. He didn't press. Then I pulled the plug on everything. Closed the joint checking. Transferred what I could to a new account. Canceled the phone plan, the utilities, the gym membership she never used but made me keep in case she got motivated. Deleted social media. Wiped my name from every place it had clung to. Even the dog got a new vet under a new alias, Charles M. That was the name I picked, just Charlie. No last name. The vet didn't ask. Cutting mutual friends was easy. Most had always been her friends anyway. They tolerated me because I made her life easier. The moment I wasn't her designated driver/wallet/cheerleader anymore, I was invisible. A few texted once or twice. I didn't respond. Eventually, they stopped. My cousin Zach called 3 times in 1 week. I ignored them all. He left a voicemail on the 3rd try. "You good?" I heard from Mel. She said, "Never mind. Just call me when you can." I never did. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I did. Zach always had my back. And if he knew where I went, eventually someone else would too. I didn't want to be found. Not yet. I drove south until the air got salty and the trees leaned like they were tired of standing. I ended up in a coastal town that didn't show up on most maps. One of those places where locals measured time in tides and outsiders stuck out like sunburns. There was a for lease sign on a dusty storefront across from a pier. I called the number. The landlord showed up in flip-flops and gave me the keys for $300 cash, no questions asked. It used to be a bait shop. I turned it into a used bookstore. Nothing fancy. Shelves made from old crates. A handwritten cash-only sign taped to the door. No one asked why I showed up alone, or why I didn't talk much about my past. Around here, you let people be ghosts if that's what they wanted. Maybe everyone was running from something. I went by Charlie. Sometimes Chuck if the old-timers got friendly. It was strange at first, responding to a name that wasn't mine. But after a while, it fit like an old coat someone else left behind. It didn't itch anymore. Nights were quiet. I read a lot. Walked Baxter along the dunes. Cooked the kind of food she used to wrinkle her nose at. Drank cheap bourbon straight from the bottle. Not out of sadness, just ritual. A way to mark the silence. There was only one thing I kept from the old life. One photo. It wasn't our wedding picture or the graduation ceremony she barely let me attend. It was older, back when she still laughed without thinking about her teeth. We were on a rooftop somewhere, eating tacos, her hair a mess from the wind. She had hot sauce on her cheek and didn't care. That version of her. I don't think she knew she'd one day gut me like a fish. I kept it tucked in the back of a copy of The Old Man and the Sea. I liked the irony. I didn't look at it often, but I never threw it away. Not because I missed her, but because I needed to remember exactly what I'd survived. The mornings were always the best. Before the sun got too ambitious, before the tourists dragged their sandals across the pier like lazy metronomes, before the air thickened with fried shrimp and motor oil. That was when the world felt clean again. Like it hadn't quite remembered me yet. I'd open the shop at 9 sharp, unlock the warped door, flip the sign, and let the smell of old paper and ocean mold blend into something almost sacred. Locals came in for beat-up copies of Grisham or to trade dog-eared westerns. A few brought coffee and stayed just to sit. No one asked questions. No one probed. Around here, everyone respected a quiet man who paid in cash and didn't complain. There was this old fisherman named Pete who stopped by every Thursday. Bought the same crossword puzzle book every time like it was some kind of ritual. Said it kept his brain from rotting in retirement. One day he asked, "You always this quiet, or you just hiding from the world like the rest of us?" I didn't answer. He nodded like that was the answer. That's how it was there. Conversations came in grunts and glances. And if you didn't want to talk, nobody made you. It was a town of the worn out and the washed up, and I fit in like driftwood on the shore. Baxter loved it too. His limp had gotten worse with age, but he still had one good run in him every morning along the sand. People knew him by name before they knew mine. A few kids called me Bookstore Charlie, and that was fine. It meant I belonged to this place now, not the one I left behind. I found a strange kind of peace in routine. Mornings in the shop. Evenings walking the pier. Reading old novels by lantern when the power flickered out. I grew to like the quiet. It wasn't lonely, it was earned. Until the letter showed up. It was a Thursday. Pete had just left, whistling his off-key version of Wichita Lineman, and I was sorting through a box of donated books when I heard the flap of the mail slot. I don't get mail. Not really. No bills, no subscriptions, no birthday cards. That's what I'd built this life around, erasure. So the sound caught me off guard. I waited a minute before walking to the door like the damn envelope might bite. It was cream-colored. Expensive. No stamp. No return address. My real name, my name was written on the front in a familiar, curled hand. One I hadn't seen in a decade. I stood there holding it for a long time, the way you'd hold something alive and venomous. Nobody here knew that name. They knew Charlie, or Chuck, or just that guy with the books. Not the man who used to fix leaky pipes and memorize legal jargon he didn't understand just to help her study. That man had been buried in the ashes of a marriage signed off like a utility bill. I almost tossed it. Almost. But I didn't. I set it down next to the register, unopened, like maybe the paper itself would confess something if I stared hard enough. The shop stayed empty for the rest of the day. Even the seagulls seemed quieter. I didn't touch the envelope. Didn't need to. Because the damage wasn't in the contents. It was in the fact that it existed at all. Someone, somewhere, had remembered I was still alive. And that meant something was about to unravel. It was the coffee guy who ruined the illusion. His name was Donnie, mid-40s, chatty, harmless, the kind of guy who thought tipping $1 made him a philanthropist. He came in every Saturday like clockwork, ordered a paperback thriller he'd never finish, and gossiped like a retiree on Facebook. That morning, he slapped a rolled-up magazine on the counter like he'd just landed a marlin. You ever see someone you used to know suddenly everywhere? I glanced at the cover. Some glossy national spread wedding edition. I half-listened while scanning a receipt. He unrolled the page with dramatic flair. She's marrying that senator guy. You know, the one with the perfect teeth and zero soul? Apparently, he left his wife last year. This one's the new model. Look at her. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But I did. And there she was. Hair curled in those Hollywood waves. Eyes glimmering with that lawyer polish she used to practice in the mirror. And that smile, tight, controlled, a product more than an expression. I knew it. I'd seen it right before she slid the divorce papers across the counter without blinking. She's a lawyer too, Donnie continued, flipping the page. Real power couple. Storybook stuff. Says here she started from nothing. Worked her way up without any help. That part made me pause. My fingers tensed around the receipt tape until it crinkled. Without any help. She'd scrubbed me out of her story like a typo. No mention of the man who skipped meals so she could eat. Who pawned his guitar to pay her LSAT fees. Who picked up shifts on Christmas Eve because tuition didn't wait for holidays. Nothing. She's stunning, huh? Donnie said, oblivious. I mean, some people just win, you know? Born for it. I smiled. Or something close enough. Yeah. She always wanted the spotlight. That afternoon I closed the shop early. Blamed it on a busted fuse. Left a sign on the door and drove out to the edge of town where the cliffs met the sea. Baxter climbed into the passenger seat with his usual huff. He knew the drill. When I got quiet, we drove. I parked overlooking the water and sat there watching waves beat the rocks like they owed them something. In the glove box was a prepaid burner I kept for emergencies, never used it. Never needed to. Until now. I pulled it out. Charged. No contacts. No history. Just the number I still remembered by heart. Zach. My cousin. The one person I'd sworn not to drag into this ghost story. I stared at the keypad. It felt wrong dialing it after all these years. But something inside me had shifted the moment I saw that smile in the magazine. Not jealousy. Not even bitterness. Just the slow, cold recognition that she'd rewritten the narrative and I wasn't in it. I hit call. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice, older, scratchier, but still Zach. Hello? I didn't speak at first. Just let the sound of the sea fill the silence. Then, hey. It's me. A pause. Then a low, shocked breath. Holy Jesus. I thought you were dead. Yeah. A lot of people did. He asked where I was. I didn't answer. He didn't push. I told him I saw her. Told him what the article said. How she smiled like nothing ever happened. Like I never happened. Zach was quiet for a while. Then he said something that stuck in my chest like a nail. She tells that story because no one else can. I knew what he meant. As long as I stayed gone, she got to be the phoenix rising. The underdog made good. No one remembered the man who built the nest she burned to fly. I didn't say much else. Just that I might need a favor one day. And when I asked, I'd only ask once. He said he'd be ready. I hung up. And in that silence, something darker than resentment settled in my gut. It wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. It was a Sunday brunch when the message hit her phone, between her second mimosa and a compliment she didn't mean. Her new husband was laughing too loud at something political. Her maid of honor, now her social secretary, was filtering selfies with practiced precision. And there she sat, one manicured finger tracing the rim of her glass, looking composed but already bored. Then the screen lit up. Unknown number. No preview. She almost ignored it. But something about the timing, a flicker of instinct buried under years of polished detachment, made her thumb pause. The message was short. You never knew what he did for you. Or what you destroyed. Just that. No signature. No sender. She stared at it like it was a crack in a mirror. Suddenly she couldn't hear the brunch chatter. Couldn't taste the citrus. Her heart didn't race, but it shifted like something deep in her remembered a beat it hadn't played in years. Her new husband leaned over, smirking. Another admirer? She turned the screen away. Wrong number. But she knew better. The next message came an hour later. This one from Zach. I stayed quiet for a decade. Because he asked me to. But you need to know what you traded. Attached, one PDF. No subject line. No explanation. Just a file name, trust_reallocation_rm_2013.pdf. She downloaded it with fingers suddenly less steady. The file opened into a scanned document, old, grainy, notarized. Her breath caught as she saw his name. His signature. A trust filed 3 weeks before the divorce. Ironclad. It detailed how he'd moved every shared asset into a separate, irrevocable trust in her name, triggered on the event of his death, incapacity, or divorce. Her name was on every clause. Every fallback. Every contingency. He hadn't just supported her dreams. He'd built a goddamn financial parachute for her without ever telling her. No leverage. No fanfare. Just love in its most unprofitable form. And she'd served him papers. She hadn't just left him. She'd wiped her feet on someone who would have died to see her win. She felt something curdle behind her ribs. Not guilt. Not yet. That would come later. This was recognition. The sour birth of regret. Her new husband noticed the shift in her face. What's going on? She clicked the phone off. Stood up. I need to make a call. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she opened her private vault. Dug through old records. Past tax filings and dormant bank statements. Things she hadn't looked at in years. She found an envelope with old legal documents. She remembered them barely. The ones he'd signed without comment. Without argument. She flipped through them now like they were evidence in a trial where she just realized she was the defendant. And then she saw it. Tucked between the pages, a photocopy of that same trust document. Her name highlighted. His handwriting in the corner, for when I'm gone. Or not welcome. Her stomach turned. She texted the number back. Who is this? The response came instantly. You'll know when you see him. Her hands shook now. Truly. She closed her laptop. Walked past her guests without a word. Her husband followed her out confused. She locked herself in the downstairs bathroom and stared at her own reflection. The version of herself she'd sold to the world, fierce, brilliant, untouchable, suddenly looked like a costume. And somewhere in the folds of memory, the sound of his voice returned. Not angry. Not bitter. Just tired. And silent. She opened the file again. At the bottom, a footnote she'd missed. The trust was linked to a P.O. box in a rural town she'd never heard of. She looked it up. Population, 3,102. A coastal dot on the map that didn't exist in her world until that moment. She traced the name of the town with one trembling finger. Then she booked a car. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up. Rain hammered the glass in sheets, blurring everything into streaks of gray and white, but she didn't slow down. 8 hours. One gas station stop. No makeup. No bags. No plan. Just her and that white lace prison she hadn't had time to change out of. The dress, once tailored to perfection, now clung to her thighs like wet tissue. Her heels had been kicked off at the first rest stop. Her feet were bare now, slick with highway filth and cheap motel gravel. The GPS screamed low battery. She ignored it. Her husband, no, not husband, not really, was probably losing his mind back at the venue. Guests sipping champagne, murmuring about the delay. Her father pacing. Her mother making excuses. And him, the politician groom, gripping the best man's shoulder like it might stop the headlines from writing themselves. She didn't care. Not anymore. The only thing in her head was a door. A plain wooden door on a coastal street, painted dark green and chipped from salt wind. She hadn't seen it in over a decade. But she saw it now, perfectly clear in her mind, like her soul had never really left it. When she pulled into town, the rain turned mean. Sideways. Almost personal. Her car fishtailed once, but she corrected it. The tires screamed as she turned down the last stretch of road, the ocean roaring on one side, wind cutting like knives through the gaps in her rolled-down windows. She parked crooked in front of the bookshop. The sign was flipped to closed. Good. Her heart was in her throat, pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She stepped out into the downpour, the soaked train of her dress dragging behind her like a corpse. She walked up the stairs. 1 step. 2. 3. Then her hand was on the door. Not knocking yet. Just there. Inside, the lights were off. But he was home. She could feel it. She knocked. Once. Twice. Then again harder. The rain drowned out the sound of her own voice as she cried his name. Please. I just want to talk. No answer. Inside, the floor creaked. She froze. She knew that creak. She'd heard it 1,000 times back when his boots came off at the end of a shift and he'd shuffle barefoot through the kitchen looking for leftovers he never complained about. She pressed her forehead to the door. Please. Just open. Inside, he stood behind the peephole. He hadn't moved. Hadn't said a word. But she knew he was there. Knew by the way the porch light flickered behind her and caught his shadow at the edge of the curtain. Knew because the pain in her chest twisted the moment he didn't open. He saw her. Dripping. Shivering. Mascara bleeding down her cheeks like a confession. He saw the desperation in her shoulders. The part of her that didn't know how to beg had never had to, now unraveling in the rain like a child who'd lost her home. And he didn't move. Didn't speak. She knocked once more. And then, quietly, I was wrong. He blinked behind the peephole. Jaw tight. Breath slow. She leaned against the door with both palms flat. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I know that now. No reply. Only the sound of thunder folding into the waves. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from permanent absence. Inside, his hand gripped something. A folded piece of paper. A letter he'd written years ago. One he thought he'd never use. He moved toward the bottom of the door. Slid it through the gap. Then stepped back into the dark. Outside, she froze as it appeared. Her breath caught. She knelt, soaked knees on cold wood, and picked it up with fingers that trembled. Inside, one list. Handwritten. Each line started with a date, followed by a sacrifice. April 9th, 09, skipped promotion interview to take you to the courthouse. 07/22/10, sold my motorcycle to pay your retake fee. December 14th, 11, took third job to cover your clerkship move. It went on. 17 entries in total. No signature. No closing. No bitterness. Just facts. Just the truth she'd never bothered to know. She pressed the letter to her chest like it might warm her. But it didn't. And behind the door, he stayed silent. Like the grave of a man she buried but never mourned. She read the letter 3 times on the porch, each time slower than the last, like her eyes were trying to soften the edges of the truth. But there was no soft in it. No plea for forgiveness. No demand for closure. Just 17 lines of quiet damnation, each one cut with a date, a detail, and the undeniable weight of her own silence. He hadn't asked her for anything. Not gratitude. Not loyalty. Not even love in the end. Just presence. Just acknowledgement. And she had given him absence in return. The letter curled in her fist as the rain picked up again. Cold needles against her back. Her dress stuck to her legs like a punishment. She didn't move. Didn't even wipe the mascara that now ran like war paint down her face. Her fingers gripped the paper so tightly the ink smudged with the oil from her skin. Then a headlights. She turned before the engine even shut off. She already knew who it was. Her husband slammed the door of the black BMW like the car had insulted him. His tux was still pressed, shoes spotless despite the puddles. He stormed across the gravel, jacket flapping open like a cape, the look on his face less confusion than fury. There you are, he barked like she'd missed curfew. What the hell is this? She didn't answer. He noticed the building then, the chipped green door, the crooked closed sign, the smell of old wood and salt. And then he saw her dress, stained gray at the hem, one strap torn loose and hanging. She looked like a ghost that had clawed her way out of the ground. Get in the car, he ordered. Now. Still, she didn't move. He grabbed her wrist. She didn't resist, but she didn't follow either. What are you even doing here? Do you know how bad this looks? You disappear from the reception, people are calling hospitals, your parents are losing their minds. She handed him the letter. He snatched it, scanned the first few lines, then scoffed. What is this? Some martyr's diary. Read it, she said quietly. I am reading it. No. You're scanning it. Try reading it like you wrote it. He looked up, eyes narrowing. Is this what you've been crying over? Some guy you haven't seen in 10 years? You're embarrassing yourself. No, she said. I did that a long time ago. He stepped closer, the paper crumpling in his grip. Look, whatever nostalgia trip this is, you're coming home. We have press waiting. Guests. This can still be salvaged. She smiled. Not a warm one. The kind of smile you give someone after they miss the point on purpose. You don't get it, she whispered. Get what? That I wasn't trying to go back to him. She turned to the door again. I just wanted to know what it felt like to stand in front of someone who actually saw me and realize I don't deserve it. Her husband made a sound, half laugh, half snarl. You've lost your mind. She ignored him. Knelt again. Slipped the letter under the door like returning an overdue library book. Something borrowed. Something that didn't belong to her anymore. Say something, the groom snapped. Tell me what you're doing. But her voice was steady now. Cold as the rain. I'm learning what it feels like to be the villain in your own story. Behind the door, he stood motionless. He'd watched the car arrive. Heard every word. The sound of her voice cracking when she whispered, I was wrong. The way she clutched the letter like it had heat. But he didn't move. He didn't open the door. And that was the answer. She stood, turned to her husband. His jaw was tight, breathing hard. You done? He snapped. She looked him in the eyes. No. But I'm finished. And she stayed. On the porch. In the rain. Next to the man who wouldn't let her back in, not out of cruelty, but because he no longer needed to. And that, she realized, was the worst punishment of all. She was still standing there the next morning, barefoot and shivering, arms wrapped around herself like they could rewind time. The dress had dried in strange, stiff waves and the makeup had hardened into a mask of ruin. The man she'd married was gone, left without another word once it was clear she wasn't leaving. The BMW's tracks in the gravel were already fading under the salt mist. She didn't knock again. Didn't dare. Instead, she waited. And finally, he opened the door. No ceremony. No flourish. Just a quiet creak and the soft thump of it stopping against the rubber wedge at the base. He stood there in a dark gray hoodie and jeans, barefoot on the wood floor. He looked older, sure, but something in his eyes was younger. Lighter. Like letting her go had peeled a weight off him she'd never noticed he was carrying. She opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "I'm not here for your apology," he said flat. She swallowed hard. "I'm not here to give one." He arched a brow. "Then why are you still standing in the ruins?" That hit. She looked down at her dress. The way the lace clung to her legs like vines. She sat slowly on the porch, knees to her chest. Her voice came out like ash. "I was going to come back to you." He didn't flinch. "I thought," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "once I made something of myself. Once I had status. Power. Once I wasn't just some girl drowning in debt and dreams. I thought maybe we could try again. On equal footing." He tilted his head. "So you left me to earn your way back to me?" She nodded. "Through a marriage with a congressman?" Her eyes filled, but she didn't blink. "That was a miscalculation." "No," he said. "That was a bet. And you lost." He turned inside briefly and came back with a small black folder. Plain. Unlabeled. He handed it to her. "No more lists," he said. "This one's not about what I did for you. It's about what you never understood." She opened it. Inside, a letter. Typed. Clean. Like something drafted by a man with no more time to waste on sentiment. "You thought I was a harbor. A safe place to dock until the weather cleared. You told yourself I'd always be here, unchanged, waiting. But I wasn't a harbor. I was a ship. And while you climbed your way up, stepping on everything you thought would slow you down, I sailed. I built a life. One that didn't revolve around your ambition or your absence. One where the silence stopped hurting. One where I didn't have to wonder if I was enough. You were never the one that got away. You were the one that left and assumed I'd stay. But I didn't. You only turned around because your pedestal cracked. And you mistook my piece for a vacancy sign. There's nothing here for you. Not anymore." She didn't realize she was crying until the ink on the page began to smear. He didn't watch her read it. He'd already walked back inside, door left slightly ajar behind him, open enough for her to leave the folder but not herself. She folded the letter back neatly, set it down, then sat there. Longer. Not because she expected him to come back, but because the only plan she'd ever made, her contingency, her emotional backup drive, her secret someday, had just been erased in a single page of truth. She had treated him like a lighthouse, fixed, patient, immune to storms. But he had moved on. And for the first time in her meticulously crafted life, there was nowhere left to return to. The bookstore was closed that morning, but the lights were on. She saw movement inside, his silhouette in the back room, sorting crates, organizing like it was just another Tuesday. Like her entire world hadn't imploded 12 hours ago. Her wedding had turned to vapor. Her public image shattered. Her carefully curated narrative now a cracked porcelain mask on the floor. She didn't knock. She couldn't. Not again. So she waited on the bench across the street, still in the same dress, her hair now tied in a limp knot, face bare. Just a woman stripped of her armor, clinging to the bones of a story she no longer recognized. Around noon, someone else arrived. A woman. Mid-30s. Jeans, boots, a leather jacket too worn to be trendy. She carried a tray coffee, maybe sandwiches. Balanced it on one hip while she unlocked the front door of the shop like she'd done it 100 times. She kissed him when she stepped inside. Not quick. Not showy. Just familiar. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask for permission because it already belongs. His ex froze on the bench. Her breath stuck in her throat like a fishbone. She watched as they talked. Laughed. She watched him reach for the woman's hand without thinking. Watched the way the woman leaned into him without shrinking herself. Then the truth uncoiled in her chest like a snake. She hadn't lost him recently. She'd lost him years ago. And this woman, this stranger, wasn't a new chapter. She was the whole second book. When the woman stepped out to take a phone call, the ex crossed the street without fully realizing it. Like something had taken hold of her legs. She approached, unsure if she was even going to speak. But the woman saw her and smiled, not cruelly. Not defensively. Just knowingly. "I was wondering if you'd come." The ex blinked. "You know who I am." "I do." There was a long pause. "Then you're the one who sent the message." The woman nodded. "He didn't ask me to. He never would have." "Why?" Her voice was barely there. "Because I needed you to know the truth. Before you destroyed everything else too." The ex's jaw tightened. "And what exactly is that truth?" The woman didn't flinch. That he stopped waiting for you a long time ago. That you weren't some great unfinished love story. You were a mistake he survived. And I'm the life he built after. The words didn't come sharp or vengeful. They came flat, honest, brutal in their stillness. He told me about you, the woman continued. Everything. He doesn't lie. He doesn't need to. That man would have carried the weight of your betrayal to his grave without ever letting it sour him. But I couldn't let you walk around thinking he was some safety net you could bounce back to. She stepped closer. You don't get to be the villain and the epilogue. The ex turned her head slightly, blinking against something hot and thick behind her eyes. How long have you two? 6 years. Since he finally said your name without flinching. That did it. The collapse wasn't loud. It was internal. Her knees didn't buckle. She didn't scream. But something in her posture changed, like scaffolding giving way. Like the part of her that had always secretly believed he'd be there, just waiting, had finally been buried under the weight of her own choices. And it was too late to grieve it properly. You think he hates me? She asked softly. No, the woman said. That's the part you don't get. He doesn't feel anything about you anymore. And that's the real loss. She opened the door again and slipped inside, leaving the ex standing there, alone in the sun, still in a dress no longer meant for anything. No more thunder. No more rain. Just quiet. And consequence. She didn't come back with drama this time. No screaming. No knocking until her knuckles bled. No barefoot theatrics in the rain. Just silence. She stood outside the shop as the sun set, dress wrinkled, hair tied back with a rubber band from a gas station counter. No makeup. No jewelry. No entourage. Just the woman underneath all that armor, finally visible. And finally too late. He opened the door before she could reach for it. Not because he was ready. Because he was finished. They stood there a moment, the evening light cutting a line between them like a courtroom aisle. Her lips trembled. His didn't. She looked up and for the first time in her life, she seemed afraid of words. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. He didn't respond. She took a step forward. I gave everything up. Do you understand that? I walked away from a life people would kill for. I ruined my name. I threw it all into the fire for you. He didn't move. Her voice cracked. Say something. Please. Still, he didn't speak. She tried again, more frantic now. Tell me it mattered. That I mattered. That you didn't just erase me. He blinked once. That was it. I need to hear something, anything, because if you don't say it, I'll go the rest of my life wondering if you ever. That's when he finally stepped forward. One pace. No heat. No tremble. Just presence. He looked her dead in the eyes. And for a split second, she thought she saw something behind them. Not love. Not hate. But the last flicker of a candle just before it surrenders to dark. He said, I mourned you once. She stopped breathing. Then he finished it. I won't do it again. And just like that he turned. Closed the door behind him. No slam. No lock clicking. Just wood resting in wood. Firm. Final. She stood there, staring at the door like it had just swallowed her name. She waited. 10 seconds. Then 30. Then a full minute. Hoping he'd come back, open it again, say something else. Anything. But he didn't. Because there was nothing left to say. Inside, he walked past the shop counter, past the worn shelves and the second-hand chairs to where the woman, the other woman, the real one, stood, folding a fresh shipment of books. She finally leave? She asked softly. He nodded. Good, she said, sliding a novel onto the shelf. Outside, the ex stood frozen. Her phone buzzed. Messages piling up. Headlines already spreading. The story was out. Her absence at the wedding, the runaway bride, the whispers of another man. The fantasy had crumbled. But she didn't care about any of it. Not now. Because no matter how much she gave up, no matter how far she ran, she couldn't rewrite the ending anymore. He'd already written it. And closed the cover.